Hello there. So, in this presentation, we're going to be looking at a poem called A Long Journey by Musaemura Zimunya. It's a poem not really about a physical journey, but more an exploration about history, colonialism, identity, and the struggles of cultural transformation. Now, we're going to break this down stanza by stanza, talk about the structure a little bit and some other things that may help you understand it. But before we do all that, let's dive in and actually listen to the poem and see what you think. A long journey through decades that ran like rivers, endless rivers of endless woes, through pick and shovel, jambok and jail. Oh, such a long, long journey. When the motor car came, the sledge and the ox cart began to die, but for a while the bicycle made in Britain was the dream of every village boy. With the arrival of the bus, the city was brought into the village, and we began to yearn for the place behind the horizons. Such a long travail it was, a long journey from bush to concrete. And now I'm haunted by the cave dwelling, hidden behind 1890, threatening my newfound luxury in this, the capital city of my mother country. I fight in nightmarish vain, but my road runs and turns into dusty gravel, into overbeaten foot tracks that lead to a plastic hut and soon to a mud grass dwelling, threatened by wind and rain and cold. We have fled from witches and wizards on a long, long road to the city, but behind the halo of tower lights, I hear the cry from human blood and wicked bones rattling around me. We moved into the lights, but from the dark periphery behind, an almighty hand reaches for our shirts. Okay, so first, probably a little bit of context is going to be useful here. Zimunya was born in 1949 in South Rhodesia, which today is known as Zimbabwe. And at the time, that was under British control, and it continued that way until 1980, when Robert Mugabe took over and became a fairly infamous dictator. So gaining independence didn't really result in the progress everybody wanted. Now, this poem, written in 1985, shows that despite colonization, the past and its traditions still hang on and refuse to die out completely. So let's begin with the opening stanza, where we're placed into a kind of metaphorical landscape. The simile, decades that ran like rivers, suggests time is flowing. The enjambment after rivers reflects this, and the repetition of endless, along with a lack of real punctuation, evokes a sense of mounting problems and tension. On top of that, the rhythm of that line is mostly trochaic, meaning there's a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed one, which gives it a really heavy, relentless feel, endless rivers of endless woes. The imagery that appears next is connected to imprisonment and forced labour. The pick and shovel were used by prisoners who were made to work, while the jambok is a kind of heavy whip used mainly during the colonial rule. Put together, we get an idea about what kind of suffering the speaker is talking about. And the final line shows the speaker's troubled feelings about this, starting with a cry of oh, and then the repetition of long, long, and note how the word, the vowel sound in this is also long. And that stanza ends with that cry, oh, such a long, long journey. And repeating long here is an example of epizeuxis, which is when we repeat a word to highlight a feeling. And here it highlights the exhausting, ongoing nature of this struggle. Now, there's quite a change in the second stanza as the speaker now starts talking about the effect colonialization had on his country. The motor car is a symbol of life here, of modern life here, and contrasts with the sledge and the ox cart that it replaced. Now, those both symbolize a much slower, rural, and traditional type of practice. And the bicycle was a dream for the village boys, showing how technology from the colonizers has influenced people. It's also an example of what's needed for a journey, linking back to the title. And note the strong alliteration of the B sound here to reflect the country's enthusiasm for these made in Britain inventions. Now, next, the bus, a larger example of technology and mass transport, is introduced. You can see here. The phrase the city was brought into the village is worth pausing on, I think. The juxtaposition between city and village is very strong here. Like it or not, the rural village was quickly transformed into a more urban kind of place, something the speaker sounds like he regrets. And it's not just the bus that's changed things. This movement of people affects people's lifestyles, values, and attitudes. And we learned that the people began to yearn for some place that can't be seen behind the horizon. This sounds very much like the grass is always greener idiom, where people want the unknown without knowing too much about its effects. And in stanza 4, Zimunya explains how this journey was not just a physical one, it's a metaphorical one too. In fact, the whole poem is one long, extended metaphor about this journey from traditional times to colonialism and then independence. In this short, very short two-line stanza, he again repeats the word long and uses more visual imagery. The bush represents tradition, and concrete represents, obviously, modernity and change. And it could be that the people are moving from the bush to modern homes, or it could be about how rural parts of the country have become urbanized. The travail here, meaning something that involves a lot of effort, illustrates how much his people had to endure as this inevitable, unstoppable change came about. Now, stanza 5 brings a change in time. We jump forward to now, and the speaker starts to use the present tense. We learn that he lives in a modern capital, enjoys the trappings of a newfound luxury, but he's still haunted by history and perhaps today's inequalities. The date 1890 is an allusion or indirect reference to the start of colonial rule in Zimbabwe. We may not immediately understand this, but we can be pretty sure that for the people there, they would certainly know this date very well. The cave dwellings of the past still there, but a cave tends to lack any kind of light, and so is hard to see and recall. Whereas the bright lights of the city, contrastingly, are much more immediate and appealing. Now, rather than moving forward through this journey, however, it feels like things have been reversed. He's gone from concrete to gravel, to a plastic hut, and a mudgrass dwelling. The overbeaten track is one of the final examples of a semantic field related to hardship. Sometimes it's literal, like the whip and the pick mentioned earlier, and sometimes not so literal, like here. They're all there to show us that the effects of colonial control can't be eroded, but are ever present in some form. And as the journey now rather cleverly goes into reverse, we return to that rural feel as the suffering of the people and their problems increase. In the final line, we see how even things like wind and rain and cold could now be a threat. And note too that polysyndeton, or the extra and here, which gives a sense of, again, of relentless problems that are piling up, threatened by wind and rain and cold. Now, the witches in the next stanza refers to superstition or old beliefs that they've tried to leave behind. But even in the glowing lights of the city, the halo of tower lights, they're not safe. A halo usually glows around something special or even spiritual, but here the use of the word seems ironic as it describes the city's lights. The people remain haunted by the past. We can sense this through the auditory imagery of the cry from human blood and the wicked bones rattling. And this is made especially clear thanks to the onomatopoeic effect of rattling, plus the alliteration of blood and bones and here and human. The bones rattling creates a ghostly kind of ritualistic feel, so history isn't just remembered, it's also felt. And this final image is, I think, particularly disturbing. The speaker and his people have moved into the light towards modernity, development, and hope. However, the dark periphery, the edge of society, the past or spiritual forces, still reaches for them. And again, we can see how Zimunya is playing with light and dark for a particular effect. That almighty hand could represent history, ancestral judgment, or even a return to poverty or trauma. It's kind of a disturbing form of personification that shows how the past refuses to be left behind on this journey. And interestingly, the speaker also moves from the first person I, top of the page here, near the start, using we near the end. And this, I think, makes it seem like the speaker is calling on his people and reminding them of what they've lost along the way, as everyone has been dazzled by the colonial city lights. And because of this, the people now seem to have been left in a rather metaphorical darkness. Okay, now let's move on and look at the structure of the poem. Now, the poem's written in free verse with no fixed rhyme or meter, and that's important as it mirrors the unstructured, uneven journey of colonial history and cultural transformation. Look at all that enjambment too, as the lines flow from one to the next, similar to the river as it takes us on this relentless, unstoppable journey. The lack of punctuation also speeds things up quite a bit. Now, there are 7 stanzas in here, each moving us through a different phase. We go past hardship, colonial influence, modern society, inner conflict, and then the aftermath of independence. And did you notice also how the stanzas are all of different lengths, again to show how this journey has been very uneven and at times unpredictable? Now, there's a clear narrative progression on this journey, but not really any resolution. It begins in hardship and ends in kind of uncertainty. Now, Zimunya uses repetition throughout, such as the long, long journey, to highlight the ongoing, exhausting nature of the transformation. And the tone of the poem, I think, shifts between one of anticipation, reflection, and suffering, thereby taking the reader on an emotional journey too. So overall, we could say the structure is quite irregular, which reflects the irregular nature of the journey these people have been on. So there we go. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that useful. If it did help, please give this a thumbs up and feel free to subscribe. And if you have any comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.